there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood.
Welcome to Creation Foundation, where we discuss worldviews and their implications. I'm Dick Temple.
And I'm Mark Finkbeiner.
And I'm Greg Morgan.
Today, we are going to discuss, is evolutionism science or religion? And to do this, we're going to start out with some definitions so that you can understand exactly what we're saying today. The definition for biblical creationism. Now, you probably realize that the three of us here are biblical creationists, so you know our bias right to start with. Biblical creationism is the belief that life exists because it was created in 6 days about 6,000 years ago, exactly like the Bible says. Evolutionism is the belief that life exists because it evolved. Now, there are a large number of beliefs that fall under this category. For instance, there's Darwinism, there's Neo-Darwinism, there's punctuated equilibrium as defined by Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge of Harvard University. There's quantum leaps as defined by the New Age movement. There's the selfish gene theory as promoted by Richard Dawkins. Then, on top of that, there is progressive creationism and theistic evolution as promoted by certain theologians who want to change the meaning of certain words in the book of Genesis. So evolutionism covers a wide range of beliefs, but it basically says that life exists because it evolved. Now, the definition for science. Science is the search for truth using the tools of observation and logic. Webster defines science as possession of knowledge as distinguished from ignorance or misunderstanding. Or science could be said to be the study of that which can be measured. Because for science to work, it must measure things and it must be able to repeat the measurement. Ken Ham has an excellent definition of science which he put together so it is complete and easily understood. He says, it is the total collection of knowledge gained by man's observation of the physical world using one or more of his five senses to investigate the world. It is used only in the present, and you can repeat your observations. Richard E. Dickerson, an evolutionist in academia, has another definition for science. He states, science is fundamentally a game. It is a game with one overriding and defining rule. Rule number one, let us see how far and to what extent we can explain the behavior of the physical and material universe in terms of purely physical and material causes without evoking the supernatural. Now, that is not a definition of science. That is a definition of naturalism. However, Richard Dickerson is in academia. He is paid to publish things that are plausible. And if he publishes anything that is not politically correct, he will never get another government grant. Consequently, for those people working on government grants, this definition actually is pretty much a working definition of science. Now, commenting on Richard Dickerson's definition, Henry Morris said, thus, science, or at least evolutionary science, is not necessarily a search for truth as we used to be told, but a game in which scientists try to find naturalistic causes for all things, including even the origin of the universe and everything in it. Mark, is evolutionism science or religion, and why?
Well, that's a really good question. You know, when I first started studying this subject of creation versus evolution, one of the first books that I bought that is on the side of the evolutionists was the Humanist Manifesto. I didn't bring it with me today, but I have that book. It's a thin book, and I've read the whole book through, called the Humanist Manifesto. Now, what is humanism? Well, humanism is the belief that mankind's thinking is the highest reality that there is. All right? We are God, and there is no infinite personal God that created the heavens and the earth. So here is what the Humanist Manifesto says in their own words right here, word for word. All right, tenet number one, religious. Now notice they call themselves religious. Religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. In other words, it evolved by chance. Okay? Tenet number 2. Humanism believes that man is a part of nature. In other words, all the animals, human beings, they're all the same. They all emerge from the same single cell. Okay? Okay, so man is a part of nature and that he has emerged, that means evolved, as the result of a continuous process. So there you go, you're hearing it from their own words. Tenet number 3, humanism recognizes that man's religious culture and civilization, as clearly depicted by anthropology and history, are the product of gradual development. In other words, evolution again. And they are actually admitting that evolution, it's the basis for history, anthropology, and so on and so forth. And then tenet number 4. Now this is a really good one. Get this. But we can discover no divine purpose or providence for the human species. Well, no wonder why Columbine happened, and no wonder why Timothy McVeigh, blew up the federal building, and why 9/11 happened. Hey, look, if there's no purpose in life, why not go out with a big bang? Why not just shoot everybody you don't like? After all, there is no real personal God, and so I'll be my own God. All right. Well, here, humanism fails on 2 accounts. First, man operating by himself cannot set up true standards of justice or values in the world without God. If one man decides his view of values is correct, while another man decides differently, who will decide between them? Okay? Second, who would decide between the Nazis and the Jewish race in World War II? Each had a set of values, but who was right? The majority, the nicest, the meanest? Without a higher standard of authority to go to, which is God, all of life is based on the values of the majority or the dictator in power. They have no sure truth to turn to. It is all a matter of opinion. And, all this, it just speaks for itself.
We define science as a search for truth using the tools of observation and logic. I fail to define religion. Religion, according to Webster, is a cause, principle, or system of beliefs held with ardor. Webster's defines ardor as enthusiasm, devotion, intensity, so that we might say Webster says that religion is a cause, principle, or system of beliefs held with devotions. Now, what is your religion? Now, you can give a name for your religion, but what really is your religion? It's what you believe is true. It's the answers to life's questions, like who am I? What am I? How did I get here? What is life's purpose? Who makes the rules? And what am I going to do about it? Now, let's define philosophy, because this is very important to understand as we discuss religion versus science and your belief systems. Philosophy is the love and study of truth, or as Webster says, the most general beliefs, concepts, and attitudes of an individual or group. Now, what is your philosophy? Well, it's what you believe is true. It's your answers to life's questions. Who am I? What am I? How did I get here? What's the purpose of life? Who makes the rules? And what am I going to do about it? Everyone has a philosophy. And a philosophy is the same thing as a religion by definition. So that when we discuss, is evolutionism science or is it religion, we need these definitions. So carry on there, Mark. Okay. Well, I want to quote a radical environmentalist. Now, this is why you and I are paying $4 a gallon for gas, okay? Well, this is the guy who founded Earth Day. His name is John McConnell. And he said here, this is a direct quote. Well, actually, he didn't say this. This was a song that was dedicated to him by another radical environmentalist by the name of Irvin M. Drake. And one of the verses in this song that was dedicated to him, here, listen to what it says here. As she did for the moss and the lichen and fern. Now that's Mother Earth, that's Mother Nature, that's Gaia. Okay, that's the God of the evolutionists. She has a lesson she'd like us to learn. Okay,
And I guess on that level, we are all connected in an endless living chain. Oh, where's that come from? Well, that comes from the geologic column, you know, where you start out with a single cell organism and you work up progressively biologically. Okay? Also, the founder of Earth Day, John McConnell, guess what he said? This is what he said at the United Nations Conference. He says, we must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader. Oops. His guy, he's actually condoning exactly what the Bible is saying, that will happen one day, that there's going to be an Antichrist that's going to rise up. Also, here is Earth Proclamation Day. Look at all the people that supported the Earth Proclamation Day, where they are worshiping the earth. Margaret Mead, an anthropologist. John Denver, when he was alive. Robert Mueller, the Assistant Secretary General, United Nations. Isaac Asimov, one of the top evolutionists in his time when he was alive. And then get this, a terrorist, Yasser Arafat. He was one of the guys that signed the Earth Day Proclamation. And then not only that, but Mikhail Gorbachev when he was president of Russia. Okay? Now, here's another quote. John D. Rockefeller. You know, at one time he was the richest man to live. Here's what he said. He said, the growth of a large business is merely a survival of the fittest. You see, John D. Rockefeller, he believed in evolution. Evolution was the foundation of his religion as far as what he believed about economics, what he believed about money. He believed in the survival of the fittest. Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest people to live while he was alive, he says this. He says, when I, along with 3 or 4 of my boon companies, was in this stage of doubt about theology, including the supernatural element, and indeed the whole scheme of salvation through vicarious atonement and all the fabric built upon it, I came fortunately upon Darwin's and Spencer's works. I remember that light came as in a flood, and all was clear. But not only had I got rid of theology and the supernatural, but I had found the truth of evolution. All is well, since all grows better became my motto, my true source of comfort. And I have all the documentation and all these things I'm saying here. Listen here. Here's the 7th tenet of the Satanic Bible. It says here, Satan represents man as just another animal. Where did I just hear that? The 77 Thesis on Earth Day that John O'Connell made up. Okay, Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. And you know what? This is radical environmentalism. Right here. Radical environmentalism is the belief that man is in the way. You know, we got to reduce the population. We've got to help man evolve his thinking, help evolve his biology better. We've got to exterminate some people, kind of like Hitler. And now here's another guy. His name is R. Gary Patterson. And he wrote this book called Take a Walk on the Dark Side, Rock and Roll Myths, Legends, and Curses. Now, this guy was a rock and roll artist, and he's not speaking out against rock and roll. This is just the title of his book. And he says this, each of these supposed virtues represents smashing the weak and following the doctrine of social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. Marilyn Manson. On the website. Now, you're not going to see this on the Satanic website anymore because they took it off, but here's what he said. He says, they mixed Satanism with the teachings of Nietzsche, Darwin, Crowley, and many other influences to make up a unique blend of free thinking that is not held back by the Christian majority of today's world. Interesting, they didn't say Buddhism or Hinduism. Oh no, it's Christian, the Christian majority. Satanists, evolutionists, they're more concerned about attacking Christianity than any of the false religions, which I find very interesting. Here's a psychologist. His name is Aaron Siegman of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. In the Reader's Digest, September 1996, he says, at one time in our evolutionary past, anger was important for survival. It prepared us to fight and defeat the target of our enemy. Wonder what enemy that would be. By the Associated Press, October 26, 1999. I have this clipping as well. Los Angeles beautiful models offered their eggs for sale in an internet auction Monday, touching off a fierce debate over the ethics of what is being called Darwin at his very best. Wow. Here's another one. The chief distinction in the intellectual powers is of the two sexes is shown by man's attaining to a higher eminence in whatever he takes up than can women. Whether requiring deep thought, reason, or imagination, or merely the use of the senses and hands, the average of mental power in man must be above that of women. You know who said that? Charles Darwin in The Descent of Man on page 586. Here's another one. Thus, man has ultimately become superior to women, poetry, strength, voice, etc. Who said that? Darwin in The Descent of Man. Sir Fred Hoyle, famous British astrophysicist, in The Intelligent Universe, Holt, Reinhardt, and Weston, New York, 1983, page 9. I am haunted by a conviction that the nihilist philosophy which so-called educated opinion choose to adopt following the publication of The Origin of Species committed mankind to a course of automatic self-destruction. The doomsday was then set ticking. Here's one more. I have many others, but we'll finish with this one. Here's what somebody said. The stronger must dominate and not blend with the weaker, thus sacrificing his own greatness. Only the broken weakling can view this as cruel. But he, after all, is only a weak and limited man. For if this law did not prevail, any conceivable higher development of organic living beings would be unthinkable. Who said that? Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, page 285. I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and I know that Greg, he's got some things to add to this.
Yes, indeed. We've got many places that we can go to for these quotes. One of the best places I know of, you can go to Answers in Genesis, and the contact information is on the screen. They have thousands of articles on creation versus evolution, and I pulled one up called The Religion of Evolution by Gary DeMar. He quotes Michael Roos, who is a professor of philosophy and author of several books, including Darwin Defended and Taking Darwin Seriously. He wrote that evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than mere science. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. I am an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian, but I must admit in this one complaint, the literalists, by which he means creationists, are absolutely right. Evolution is a religion. This is true of evolution in the beginning, and it's true of evolution still today. Now, what did he mean when he said this is true of evolution in the beginning? I'm not sure how far back he went, because actually the ancient Greeks believed in some form of evolution, including believing that in the spring, birds turned into frogs. After all, the birds disappeared and frogs began appearing. They believed that in the fall, the frogs turned back into birds. That's because birds migrated back in and the frogs went into hibernation. But what he's referring to here about evolution in the beginning is almost certainly the beliefs of Mr. Huxley. Huxley was Darwin's biggest defender, and he was known as Darwin's bulldog. He was extremely anti-Christian. He wanted to wipe Christianity off the face of the earth. But the interesting quote here is from his grandson, who became the head of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. He was asked why, of all the scientific theories, most of which take years, decades, even generations to be accepted, why was evolution accepted so rapidly in a matter of weeks after the publication? He said, I suppose it was because it gave their believers an intellectual basis for practicing their sexual freedom. Now, that's not exactly a scientific explanation, is it? but it's the truth. Most of Darwin's immediate followers, including Darwin himself, had some very gross sexual practices. They were definitely frowned upon by the society at the time. But once they had this book out there, they could say, this is what we should be doing. It's survival of the fittest. It means that we'll have more descendants. Darwin had a mistress who actually lived in his house and bore his children, and his wife apparently wasn't able to do anything about that. But evolution gives a basis for virtually all of a person's activities. And I know that because of my own experience. In 7th grade, I saw a series of films, science films, that convinced me that evolution was true, the earth is ancient. I bought the whole proposition. And I maintained the belief in evolution as I went through high school, got a degree in mechanical engineering, and went into the Navy. In the Navy, 2 friends, they set out to make sure they were my friends, and they witnessed to me about Jesus Christ, about my need to accept him, about how he had created me. And I was amused. I hope that I didn't show that. I was trying to be polite. But as an evolutionist, I believe that there was no creation, that there was no creator, and evolution was my philosophy, and it was my religion. It took 18 months of them witnessing to me before I would even, well, I still wouldn't consider it until I saw 2 people die in front of me, and that's when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. I don't believe I could have done that if they hadn't presented some of the arguments that says that Darwin wasn't really right. But I've also, since then, had many opportunities. I've done some teaching. I've done individual witnessing with people. And it's interesting that when I present the scientific arguments for the existence of God and for biblical creation, people have several times come to the conclusion that I was correct, that the science actually supports biblical creation. One of them went so far as to say, you know, Greg, you're right. All of this information that you've given me shows that you're correct, that the Bible really does tell the truth. But all of that is based on a foundational point that says that God exists. And he said, I'm not willing to accept that, so I'm rejecting this whole thing. And then he turned around and walked away before I could say anything further. When people believe in evolution, it often is their religion. It's at least their philosophy. And they're not willing to give up that philosophy because they see that it may put, if they accept Jesus Christ, there may actually be restrictions on some of their activities. Don't we all want a few restrictions on people's activities? Let's see, thou shalt not kill. We want people not to go around murdering everybody. Thou shalt not commit adultery. You may not mind if other people commit that as long as it's not against someone that you love. Darwin established a religion. And we might remember that his only degree was in theology. And most of the arguments in The Origin of Species are theological arguments. So it started out as a religion, as Mr. Roos says. It still is a religion. And we're encouraging you to change religions.
So where does all this lead to? You know, I think it's fairly well established. Evolutionism is a belief system which is a religion. For some people, it is their whole religion. However, for much of the world, evolutionism is a doctrine of their religion. It is a doctrine that has invaded almost every religion in the world, including Christianity. Now, recently, a prominent theistic evolutionist was endorsed and promoted by Eugenie C. Scott, who said that what he had to say was the thing all Christians should believe. Now, Eugenie C. Scott is financed by the Carnegie Foundation. Her entire purpose in life is to destroy Christianity. Now listen, think about this. If your belief system is being endorsed by Eugenie C. Scott, whose whole life purpose is to destroy Christianity, don't you think it's time that you gathered more information and got your evidence together and rethought your position? Now, the doctrines of the New Age. See, the New Age, the evolutionism has gone through the entire New Age religions. The doctrines of the New Age religions are these. Evolutionism, number one. Number two, there is no absolute truth. Everything is relative. You define your own reality. And there is no absolute standard for right and wrong. Then there is toleration for everyone who accepts these first three doctrines of evolutionism and no absolutes. But intolerance for anyone who does not accept evolution and believes there is an absolute standard for right and wrong. So the New Age is a conglomeration of religions having the same basic doctrines. Now, it has a very wide range. There are multiple other doctrines that are included in the different forms of New Age religions. However, these four doctrines that I've just discussed are the ones that define the conglomeration that works together as one unit. You know, it ranges from the occult and environmentalism all the way to political correctness. You know, most of them have Eastern mysticism as Hinduism and Buddhism. Notice that humanism, communism, socialism, Nazism, and the postmodernism all have the same New Age doctrines of evolutionism and no moral absolutes. Now, in the 1960s, the United Nations voted to promote a one-world religion. Now, at their world headquarters in New York City, they have their own resident guru and New Age prayer rooms. Now, in the 1960s, they experimented with converting Christian young people, Christian college students, to the New Age. I had firsthand experience with that because I was one of the guinea pigs. Now, Yuri Bezmenov, an ex-KGB agent, said that the KGB spends 20% of its budget on espionage. It spends 80% of its budget on recruiting what he called useful idiots. He defined the useful idiots to include fundamentalist Marxists and environmentalists. And these are the people they recruit to carry on their propaganda. Now, can we expect the United Nations to be any less astute in how to promote their one world government, their one world religion? See, the three fundamental doctrines again are evolutionism, no absolute truth, and no absolute morality. The Movement newspaper in 1983 cited Robert Mueller, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, in an article in which he was describing how to achieve a one-world government and a one-world religion. He said, and I quote, "I believe the most fundamental thing we can do today is to believe in evolution." End of quote. You see, evolutionism is a religious doctrine. It's spread worldwide and it has global implications. You can see why Christianity is the only religion that is being excluded from the public education system. And you can see where evolutionism is leading as you just watch politics around the world.
The Bible talks about a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood, of a worldwide flood. If there really was a worldwide flood, what would the evidence be? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down the water all over the earth. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down below water all over the earth. Well, there really was a worldwide flood